Welcome to our Mckinley marketing webinar here. It is our third in the Pivot webinar series. I'm Tracy Talbot, the Senior Vice President of our marketing practice, and I'm joined by Ron Rosenbaum and Loretta Cranbourne. Ron is the, let me make sure I get this right, Ron, the Chief Global Marketing and Business Development Officer of ASIS. An individual membership organization with 34,000 members of security professionals. And Loretta is the Managing Director of ASCE. The civil engineers have 150,000 members. And both Loretta and Ron have really interesting backgrounds. Loretta has corporate experience, branding experience, which after 10 years at ASCE, that combination positions her really well for this moment in time. And Ron also with a background in associations and really helping associations diversify their revenue, also is well positioned to navigate COVID-19 and all that has unfolded for our organizations these days.
Sure has.
So just a note, a housekeeping note for all of you. We do have a chat feature and ask that if you have questions to please go ahead and put those in as they occur to you, and we'll save some time at the end to respond. So just want to make sure we have that noted. I think I'm going to start off just by sharing some insights from Mckinley's Association Viewpoint study and lessons learned from the last Great Recession. So we have been tracking associations' perspective on the economic impact on the association sector for the past 10 years. This year we fielded the survey in February. Everything looked rosy, and then when we went to publish those results, the world had turned upside down. So we took a look at, what were those lessons learned out of the last recession, and how did associations emerge from that in a strong position, and arrived at a couple of conclusions. Preserving the core, so membership retention and a focus on that excellence in membership. Investing in the membership function, fostering community, providing timely information, and revenue diversification. This time around, we're adding on to that recommendations for rapid innovation. And we're going to talk a little bit about product development at some point, strategy, really having a clear idea of where the organization is going. And both of your organizations have a very strategic focus, and the importance of that value proposition. So I think one of my first questions for all of you with that backdrop of where we are today is really, how have you adapted your marketing strategy in the wake of the COVID-19 disruption? And by that, I mean messaging, community events, kind of all of that in that big tent. Loretta, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So obviously COVID-19 hit us very quickly on the one hand, and very deeply. So we moved very quickly in terms of community and communication in particular. For community, we had lessons learned from the last recession, and we opened up, this is the time to share with the overall civil engineering community. We opened up our collaborate boards. We put out a resources COVID-19 page very quickly. We did which listed all of the important resources that some of our civil engineers in the community could find quickly, and learn more about how ASCE could help them. So from a communication standpoint, really it's all about, we're here for you. And we did happen to launch a campaign earlier in the year to really reinforce our value proposition. And that was all around forward faster, because ASCE is an organization that can help you move faster as an individual, but also in terms of your industry and in terms of the wider community and the country. I mean, and the the world as a whole. That's sort of part of our mission. And the early part of our year was focused on the value proposition of career acceleration. Like, we're the organization that can help you drive your career forward, help you with in your organization. But when COVID-19 came along, we had to shift that. And so the other part of our value proposition is change navigation. And we're here to help you navigate the most, the most serious and deepest situation that anyone is, the last century, anyone has seen. So that was really, our focus around community, around communications, and with a mindset, keeping in mind all the things you just mentioned there, Tracy, to do it in a way that you have very startup kind of mindset. Like, this is the time to be nimble. This is the time to try new things. We launched also a whole slew of content areas, like a roundtable called Thursdays at 3 p.m., focusing on some of the issues that are most pertinent in our civil engineers' minds. We launched a 33 days and 33 civil engineers podcast to get a sense of the perspective of our members all around the world, and especially here in the US. So we really had, and we did an industry pulse check-in so that we could get a sense for, how our members were feeling, how they were reacting, and we continue to do that. We'll continue to do that over the next couple of weeks. So a whole slew of things to get to really be there for our community.
That's really interesting. Those that listening effort too. I imagine that through those podcasts, while you're serving the community, you're also gaining really, really relevant and timely intelligence.
Yeah, sure.
And Ron, how about you? How has ASIS adapted?
Can I just say ditto to all that? Wow, I'm so impressed with what you did, and we've done a lot of very similar things. Our team stood up every Friday news brief that went out to our membership and to all of our constituents, frankly, just around COVID-19 and resources related to that. And our content team really took an active role, whether it was from our magazine or others that helped generate that, even pulling it from the community, resources outside of ASIS International, to make sure that our constituents had something, this resource they could lean on every week to make sure they're getting the most up-to-date and accurate information around COVID-19 and how that's impacting them personally, how it's impacting the profession, their businesses, whatever it happens to be. In terms of general messaging and our tone, that's shifted pretty dramatically for us. And I think, Loretta makes a good point in terms of being nimble. We had to shift on the fly from a real kind of marketing focused messaging approach. We call that kind of the exclamation point, to one that's more communication based and empathetic, if you will, or the period. And so it became less around selling products and services to one about making sure that people knew that there was this resource library there for them that they could lean on if they needed it during difficult times. So it was a very different tone. And we've used that across everything that we do, whether it's us talking to members, us talking to exhibitors, to attendees for our events. It's a very different kind of approach than we've taken in the past. And it's resonated quite a bit with those audiences.
How is that rapid innovation working for you all within your organization. So I know historically, there's a marketing process, but I imagine that's had to really shift pretty dramatically. Loretta, something that we talked about was how you've had to be so nimble, and you're looking at things in sprints. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we're looking at things weekly, if not, every 2 weeks, if not weekly, to shift what our priorities are. We have a plan. We started the year with a plan. And now what we're looking at are the adjustments to that plan, things that we're going to cut, things that we're going to keep. But that process is, I think this situation has really focused the organization and put the importance on the cross-functional team, because when things are moving so quickly as they are, you don't have the luxury of going through your process. So we stood up some teams to focus on the areas of event cancellations. There's a SWAT team that manages that, as things were unfolding, so that we could have a consistent process there. And we have a virtual event or event process for virtual events, because we do about 12 to 15 events across ASCE. So each one, we need a consistent approach to all of that. But really, this is the time from the marketing side and the product and the programs that I mentioned. And this, again, comes from a cross-functional team. It's about an idea. It's about looking at the collaborate boards. It's about trying some new things at low cost. Seeing how our members are responding. There isn't a playbook for this kind of a dramatic change that we can look at. And so it's looking at some of the insights and trying it out. So in terms of an overall process, that has been condensed drastically as we pull the different subject matter experts and the different teams together on a much more focused and regular basis to evaluate how things are working and what we might continue and what we might drop.
Right. And Ron, how about you? How are you deciding what really is a priority in this environment in terms of revenue generation and also impact for members?
Yeah, I think we have seen a much more collaborative and kind of cross-departmental approach to looking at these things than ever before. And we are an organization that believes that getting out of silos, working cross-departmentally, having input from all areas of the organization before you make important business decisions really matters. And we're going to continue to lean on that. But I would say that we've probably become a little bit less focused on process management in a way, because we've had to be so much more nimble and get things out into the market quicker than ever before. So that timeline has been accelerated in a way. But on the other hand, what that has done, I think, is heightened our level of creativity as a team. So because you have to start thinking more quickly and nimbly about how you look at product innovation and what your needs are in terms of your constituents. And, when you've got 34,000 members, but also a prospect audience, and then some of your constituents are not members, they're vendors or they're other groups too, and being able to segment to them and make sure they're getting from you what they need on issues and topics that matter to them. I think all the things that Loretta talked about in terms of mining your communities through your online platform, ours is called ASIS Connects, but it's a higher logic platform where we have very specific communities there that might address school safety or physical security or cybersecurity or whatever those happen to be, and really spending time in there and understanding the topics and the issues that they're dealing with and talking about amongst their peers to make sure that the resources that you're putting in the marketplace are adapted to the things that matter to them most in real time. So it's been a really interesting exercise to see how our teams have come together from across the organization that have different goals and agendas based on what they do to provide products and services out into the market quickly that are appropriate for those constituents of yours.
This leads to my existential question for associations. Jay and I have talked about this over the years. Product development really lives outside of marketing. And it strikes me that with this rapid innovation that you're talking about and the cross-functional teams, that there's an opportunity for marketing to really play a greater role in product development, product innovation. And I'd be interested, Loretta, how you see that standing up kind of going forward, and what foundation needs to be in place for marketing to really drive or have a hand in that product innovation.
I think you have to be a good listener. I think you have to be a good team player, so that you can be part of the conversations where these decisions are being made. I think there's a recognition that we need, as a whole, we need to be much more demand driven, and marketing typically is closer to the data, closer to the member or the customer from that standpoint. So I have seen the shift over the past few years. I mean, I came from a very different environment, which was very data oriented around Nielsen, around the customer, and in associations, you've got the supply side, you've got subject matter experts, and so I think I've seen the transition towards really like, well, what's playing well? What do we need to do more of? And now it's the challenge of matching that with the people who can deliver. I think we do a pretty good job, but with the influx of data that we can access and will continue, what this situation has shown us is that it's only going to be much more of a digital transformation going forward, and I think that will allow us to deliver the programs and products, continue to do that in a way that meets our members and customers' needs. So
for some of those smaller organizations that might not have the resources of ASCE or ASIS, what are sort of the fundamentals that they need to have in place, as you said, to have that data that really helps uncover those customer insights?
So if it's user or consumer member research on a very, if it's at least an annual basis, if not more frequent, so they need to have that. They need to be looking at the analytics on their website, which is probably their main vehicle for how they're seeing how their members are responding, and they need to kind of dig a little deeper in those areas. I mean, you can't have everything. Even for ASCE, we can't have all the platforms and all the tech that we would like. But I think you have to know what questions you want to ask. What do you need to know? What's the gap? And then be resourceful about how you find that across your organization. Yeah.
How about you, Ron?
Yeah, I agree in terms of typically your marketing and your communications team, who usually are driving your social media campaigns, most of your digital campaigns, all the things that are pretty easily trackable, have a good finger on the pulse of what is resonating out in the marketplace. So whether it's looking at those analytics around your own communities, or the communities you've developed publicly around LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever the platforms are that you use. And then to Loretta's point, as you're looking at your analytics around your website and where people are spending their time, are they on your website going to your COVID resources? Are they also going to your certification pages? Are they, just kind of getting a sense of how they're spending their time with you as an organization and where they're finding the most value, so that you can reinvest in those areas pretty nimbly and pretty quickly to make sure they've got what they need when they need it.
Thanks. That leads me to my next question, which is really about member recruitment. I on the ASAE Collaborate discussion threads, I've seen a lot about recruitment, retention, what are associations doing at this point in time. And Loretta, I know you said you opened up your community to non-members, and you'd also made some changes to your big annual recruitment campaign. How have you married those two changes and seen some success with member recruitment despite all that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for sure. It's really not the time for a hard sell. It's about engagement. It's about being there. Having said that, we've got to you still got to do what you've got to do in terms of being out in front of people. And in our case, because we did have new news in terms of these programs that we had launched, new virtual conferences that are free to members and non-members. We had something new to say in something like a direct mail, which we had put off because of the uncertainty, and direct mail and uncertainty we don't need that. It's already tough. So we'd postponed that, and we rapidly changed the messaging on that. We made so that we postponed that for about a month or two so that we could see kind of how things were going. And we're actually seeing, a decent return on that at this point. And I think part of it is because, we had changed our message to meet the moment with the message. And part of that is we had new names that had come from our Collaborate boards. So we had been mining those. In terms of our email automation, we have various campaigns going out for win back, re-engagement, and we changed all of the messaging, not all of it, but specific aspects, again, not really focusing on the hard sell aspects, even career acceleration at a time when people are being furloughed and losing their jobs. That's just not going to resonate. So we wanted to drive home, that we're there for them, and look at that as an opportunity also for brand building, brand awareness. We're not going to get the return that we may have gotten on in a good year, but brand building is still important even when times are tough, because you want to be ready for when it's recovery time, and so you've got to be in the selection.
Yeah, we actually launched a Stronger Together brand campaign around this when this came out, because I think what we have found with our pretty large membership base, that community is one of the things they find most valuable. So when we do our surveys, our pulse surveys, whatever they are, and try to get a sense of what they see as most valuable in their membership in terms of benefits, the community element of that always rises to the top. So we have put a lot of resource into building out that ASIS Connects community, that higher logic platform that we talked about, where they can go and have these conversations amongst their peers and get the answers that they need, sometimes from their peers versus getting them from us. So we view the organization as the bridge builder often, or the platform that allows them to get what they need versus feeling like we have to be the ones to drive those answers all the time. So there's an element of that we play in terms of providing resources, but also just making sure there's a place for them to go and have that conversation amongst subject matter experts in their area. And not just broadly from a security standpoint, but very specifically within the vertical area in which they work. So that's been a huge improvement for us over the last year to 2 years, where we have broadened that similarly to how you've done that, Loretta, but a little bit different is ours isn't opened up to the broader public, the non-members, but recently we converted what we call our councils to communities of interest. So whereas councils in the past were made up of usually 15 or 20 people in a certain area, whether it's school security or physical or whatever those are, and there's an application process to be a part of that, it's now an open community where anyone that lives and works in those specific verticals can come be a part of that dialogue. So it's a very different kind of experience. And then lastly, we find that our members are the biggest advocates for the organization. So if you're providing the right resources and the right platforms for them, they are better at going out and telling that story for you than you can be in any way. So we want to make sure that we are providing the right kind of tone and the right types of services right now during a difficult time, so that when they go out into their own communities, or they go on to LinkedIn, into our community or whatever, and they're talking about how ASIS was there for them during a difficult time, you start to see your membership tick up as a result of those things, because it's kind of first person credibility building for the organization. So that's really, it's been rewarding to see our membership numbers still trending in a good direction right now during a really challenging time for a lot of individuals and companies from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, I love that change that you made to reduce that friction in the experience. Like, that is something that just drives me nuts about associations. You know, the council used to have the application process. Now you've got an open community. Those kinds of changes just are, that's what we all expect in our consumer life. We can just click on a button and sign up for something outside of the association, but inside the association, that user experience is so sometimes very burdensome. So anyway, that's just my.
But Casey, now you bring up a good point, because now is actually a very good time to look for those opportunities to make the changes that may need to be made. We in January, we made the decision to do a lot more meetings virtually.
Before all of this,
did we know the future? Were we anticipating tremendous backlash? You know, no, not quite, but it was the right thing to do from a you know, an inclusive standpoint, to get more participation. Yes, it also, you know, is helpful when you're trying to move things quickly, but it served us very well when we were faced with the changes that we've had to make. And I think those kinds of foundations and looking at opportunities for improvement during this time, you know, we're all looking to do that, and there's definitely room to do so, I think.
Well, I think for those of us who spent a career on the event side of the business as well, we'll always believe that there's real value in in-person events, right? The networking and the marketplace piece and all the other stuff that comes along with that is so critical. And I think that as our society gets a little bit more back to normal, whenever that is, hopefully sooner than later, I think people are going to be craving that experience.
Yeah.
And we'll all be ready to deliver that. But in the meantime, how do we replicate that in a way that is still really meaningful and still delivers some of those other elements of an event that historically have not been part of kind of online or virtual events in the past. And I think that's what we're all trying to work through right now, almost on the fly, right? So it's something our team's spending a lot of time looking at right now.
do you have the answer, Ron?
Well, I have some answers, but you know, these webinars are a good example of where I think, you know, we all spend time trying to learn from our peers and get a better sense of what's happening, right? So our team, our operations and events and business development team are spending a lot of time with other allied associations looking at how they're delivering their virtual events and saying, how do you actually create a marketplace online in a way that's valuable to your exhibitors, if you will, but also to your attendees, because they find value in coming and seeing the latest and greatest in terms of what your vendor partners bring to an event. So we're starting to see some different ways in which that's created in a more virtual experience. But same in terms of the networking. I view it like, just because, you know, you're going to get this great education over the course of 3 to 5 days or whatever it is, however you deliver it online, doesn't mean that it has to be void of having experiences where those people can still get to know their peers, network in a different way, have a fun experience, see a musical act come in some way. We're starting to see not only other associations, organizations deliver their events in that way, but you're seeing it when you see the NFL draft on TV and Luke Bryan's playing in the middle of selections and things like that. So taking things that are happening outside of our space and trying to incorporate them into how we deliver experiences, I think is an important way for us all to kind of look at how we replicate our events in a different way too.
And how do you see marketing that event changing? Because as some of these events are going virtual, some are free, not all. Is that changing the landscape for you?
It is, and I think our team actually looks at it as an opportunity, meaning for our in-person event, we've always had a virtual element, but not as robust as what we might be considering now. There's a real opportunity to even broaden your tent right now, because oftentimes you can't get a lot of your international market to make the kind of time investment or financial investment to come and participate with you. So for Global Security Exchange, we want it to be a more global event. And so to have a way for your global audience to plug in and really get that substantive experience, both educationally and in your marketplace and in from a networking perspective, really provides a more kind of real-time, nimble opportunity for them to be a part of what you've delivered in a more in-person experience in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do see the virtual experience allowing us to continue that conversation with the member or the participant much longer, perhaps, than even the in-person event. There's pros and cons for both. I mean, I don't think you can ever replicate that networking, bonding experience at an in-person event necessarily in the same way, but you can be much more deliberate, perhaps, over a longer period of time. So it's not just a once a year or once every 2-year event. You can change up the event to make it much more appealing and accessible, and learn exactly what your audience is most interested in, the type of topics, and get that real-time feedback. That's the part I'm most excited about as we look to the virtual experience. And I don't think we're going to go solely to that, even when things improve. But I don't think it's going back to that point where we only have in-person events. I definitely think it's going to be a hybrid as we look to the future.
We have an interesting question on this topic. Any thoughts on using an association app versus the website to get out resources and content during this challenging time? Do you think there's a perception of an app being more current than a website? That's from Kathy LaRocca.
Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in, which is, I think, we have to use every tool in our toolbox to do this, right? So, we spend a lot of time now looking at all of our platforms kind of holistically and saying which ones are appropriate for certain types of content and which ones are appropriate for certain types of, I'll use the word promotion, but messaging, to make sure that people know what they need to know when they need to know it. And as you're looking at the analytics and the dashboards behind these things, you have a sense of how they're engaging with your app, how they're engaging with your website, how they're engaging with your email, how they're engaging on your social media platforms. And then you have a better sense of what's the most appropriate kind of content or just information sharing across those things. So we want to, I think this is a really important point that Loretta made earlier, which is you've really got to be on top of your analytics and your data to make sure that you are not just speaking out into a black hole, that what you're saying is actually resonating with your very specific kind of targeted audiences, depending on how they consume information most effectively.
Anything to add to that, Loretta, on the app?
I mean, if it's a question of do you put it on the website or the app, to me, as long as everything's user-friendly, I don't see why you wouldn't want to do both. I mean, I think people tend to forget that they have apps that they've downloaded for conferences. So if something came up in a push notification that was interesting, it may break through more than putting it on the website. So try it, see what works for your audience. As you've all probably heard that phrase, you've met one association, you've met one association. So I think now's the time to try everything, and not to overthink things that you could see some upside to.
Are there any tests that you've run that or specific campaigns that maybe surprised you sometime over the past 10 weeks that have been successful?
So we ended up in this period drastically reducing the number of emails we sent because we did not want to. We wanted to have the right, appropriate tone, and empathy is everything at this point in time. And that, along with the the new programs, increased our click-throughs. They doubled our click-throughs.
Wow.
and opened and improved our open rates for all of our emails, like on average, to about 35% by 6% or so. So that's not surprising, but it's nice to have the data that if you send
right.
less and increase, the relevancy, you might see better results. So that's a message marketing fully understands it, Sometimes not so easy for the rest of the organization.
Right.
We all understand. We've all got our priorities. So,
how about you, Ron? Any testing that you've done that has had great success or failures?
Well, yeah, we had a campaign that we launched. We were starting to see, given the profession that we support in security, that we have a lot of frontline security professionals that are out doing unbelievably amazing work during this really difficult time. And while they may not be plugged into what we're doing because they're so focused right now on doing the great work that they're doing, they should be recognized and appreciated. And their peers who might not be playing a similar kind of role have been very eager to make sure that they can recognize those folks. So we launched a kind of a hashtag security stars or security heroes campaign and it was really interesting to see the organic engagement around this campaign, where our members were very eager to highlight and thank their peers and their colleagues who are out doing amazing things. And the beauty of this, beyond the recognition that they deserve, is that we can now use this to say, these are people that we would invite to Global Security Exchange and give them a free registration because they've done something amazing. So, we're trying to leverage campaigns like that to feed other things that we do. That campaign could be used in our foundation's scholarships and grants for people that have done amazing work. So it's had legs beyond what we expected it to on the front end when we launched it initially. But it's also been one of those community building, feel good kind of efforts that I think our members find so valuable and appreciate so much about the fact that they've got an organization like ours that helps foster that kind of community feeling.
Yeah, definitely. That sort of leads to the question of the emotional connection. Something Loretta and I talked about was their ASCE's Concrete Canoe competition is a really meaningful event for the student community. And that's been canceled this year. And so, and layer onto that the student population is a pipeline for membership. And so how do you kind of keep those pipelines active and reinforce that emotional connection with the organization when those really important touch points are changing?
Yeah, it's it was heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when students have to come rushing home, but especially after some of our civil engineering students. They they start in the fall and they work all year until about the spring, and they compete in this flagship event. And it's really not just a learning experience from a technical standpoint, but it's all aspects. So it's one of those things that our members look back on and think, wow, it was so formative to them. So to have it be canceled, it's definitely something that we hope doesn't happen next year. I mean, it's quite serious. If a lot of schools are canceled in the fall, when they begin this journey, we're going to have a different approach. Now, for the meantime, we don't have the answer because we're still trying to we're waiting to see what the schools are going to do. But we're focused on the communication and the empathy and the being a resource. What's on their mind right now is what they're going to do this summer, what's their job or internship. So that's where we're going to focus and double down and make sure that we can help them as best we can. Whether it's the job boards, the student series that we have, a virtual event series where we're just reaching out, we're communicating, trying to add value while that is sort of figured out, so that they understand that we're the organization that can help them in good times and also in the challenging times. We are their professional home. So
I imagine mentoring programs become even more important with all of this.
Yeah, and we've actually seen a good increase. We launched a mentoring, a mentor module. I believe it's through Higher Logic as well, and we have seen an increase, and that is in participants, and it's going to be a great way moving forward to learn and to keep the connections going until people are ready to hire again. So.
How about you, Ron? Any thoughts for how to replace that emotional connection?
Well, I think, from a mentoring standpoint, we've always found that that's kind of baked into the community focus that we both articulate in terms of talking about our value proposition, but also providing tools like ASIS Connects and our events and other things that do foster that networking, where you find your leaders within the organization, your volunteer leaders and others that are more senior in the profession, naturally start to take on more of a mentoring role for younger folks in our profession or people that are coming into the profession as a second career. So that's been an important part for us, and our foundation does a lot to foster that with scholarships and other things too. But I do think that's an important pipeline for the health and the vitality of associations like ours, to make sure that you have a very diverse membership across all different types of demographics. And so we've put a lot of time and resources into making sure that we are giving them the type of platforms and channels to create those mentoring and kind of teaching opportunities for younger or mid-career kind of professionals that aspire to do more within the profession as they go.
Mm-hmm. I'll also add, Ron, that the importance of the local experience, that's going to be key over the next couple of years. So to the extent that we can, bolster that experience, we're actually working on a digital strategy right now. And so from a technology standpoint, we should be able to help, bring focus to our local sections and branches, or we call them sections and branches, but they're chapters, as to what's going on there and what the value proposition is for that local experience, because some people they don't know, they're so busy, and they don't always understand what's going on at the local level. So I think that's going to be helpful, because until people are really comfortable traveling, it's going to be quite local experience, and that's where we want to continue, and we know that is definitely a core component of the experience for many of our members, and where they see a ton of value jobs and with career development. And so how do we bolster that in the time to come? So
yeah, no, I think that's a really great point. And we, unrelated to this, but with more of a global vision in mind, had gone through a global governance exercise over the last, probably really over the last year and a half with our board of directors, in an effort to stand up regional boards in 6 regions around the globe. Because we have chapters, we have hundreds of chapters around the world. But having a board of directors in each of those regions, for example, for us was really critical, so that those chapters have kind of their own version of the mothership to work up to, so that they can get content and networking opportunities and other things in their regions that are more tailored and customized to what they find valuable. Because, you know, it's difficult. I think we, being headquartered in the United States, often get stuck, and when I say we, I'm talking about the association community, in a place where your content and your events and things like that feel very North American centric. But you want to make sure that you can provide resources to your members across the globe. If you're a global organization, that is relevant to them, that speaks their language, that they can use in real time, versus trying to customize or extrapolate from what you're delivering, if it's more North American centric, to what they do. So having that structure in place that allows more of that kind of boots on the ground approach to creating content and delivering it in a more localized way is something that we're really focused on, but I think is really critical for all of our organizations as we come out of the COVID environment that we're in, hopefully sooner than later, and start to look at how we deliver products and services better and quicker and more effectively and more relevantly to our members and our constituents.
How will you market those? Will that be centralized in North America, or will that be regionalized as well, the marketing for those programs?
Yeah, the intent would be that it would be more regionalized. If they're hearing from their own board of directors, if you will, their own peers, their volunteer leaders within their region and within their chapters, then it's going to resonate more. So there may be core messaging developed that's coming from us, and we're working with them to make sure that it's relevant and that it's resonating within those markets. I think it's important to make sure that that connective tissue is there, because a lot of what they're delivering has to make sure that it ties to organizational mission and things like that as well. But we have to be sensitive to the fact that there are nuanced approaches within these regions that we just can't deliver or replicate on our own.
Great. We have about 10 minutes left, and I wonder, one of the webinars we held last week was Bob Chalker of NACE and Abe Eshkaneski is the CEO of the Association for Supply Chain Management. And they were talking about, as they evaluate strategic priorities, they're divesting of products and services that are time consuming or no longer make sense. Have you done any of that shedding in this environment?
We have taken a much more deliberate approach to looking at our products and services, knowing that we had to be more nimble in terms of making sure that we're getting it out into the market quicker based on what we're seeing in our analytics and on our different channels and all that stuff, right? So it's interesting to see the tone, even internally, in terms of our strategic planning, from what historically has been an and. It's like, do all this stuff and do this and do that, because these things bubbled up as something that seems important, to more of the or, which is, if these things are really critical right now in the moment, then what are we gonna think about either putting on the shelf for the moment or sunsetting or whatever that happens to be, so that we can do those things really well, right? Because, you know, starting new projects or delivering new services from scratch is not a light lift, no matter what it is. So it can't just be the and for teams that are increasingly taxed and asked to take on more with less. So we are trying to shift our own thinking in terms of looking at our overall portfolio and saying, if we're going to add new things to it, what are the things that don't necessarily need the same kind of time and attention right now in this moment, and maybe we come back to it later when the timing is better, or we just say that's not even relevant anymore. And it's been great for so long, but goodbye. So it's been an interesting, it kind of full circle. It goes back to that earlier conversation around how our teams are working better and differently now in this environment in a more collaborative way.
Loretta, anything to add to that? How are you seeing that? Is revenue a piece of that? ROI?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't speak to the shedding aspect at this point. We've been very busy sort of navigating the now. It's easier to not do things, however, at this point. And so it's easier not to add things, entirely new products that just don't seem to be meeting any member need. The realignment of current programs and services is naturally going to fall out in the budget process over the couple of months. So I think, what was important, as Ron says, pre-COVID-19 may not be at all important today. What's important today, we look at the data that we have and see how we want to move over the next 2 to 3 years. So yes, it's always hard to shed, but I think we have an opportunity to really focus on what matters most, and that may make some decisions so much easier than would have been even 3 months ago. So.
Yeah. Do you have any advice on how associations should manage their marketing budget? Have you had to trim it? And if so, how are you managing?
Yes, we've had to trim it. For us, because we have membership as a big component in there, we're really looking at the ROI. So everything kind of goes in to the ROI model, and if we don't have a decent chance of a return, we're not going to do it. We're not doing right now or in the past few weeks, telemarketing. And we have a very there are good agencies out there who are telling you it's not the best time. So that makes it to be an easy decision. We just can't do anything that might work and spend, because it's all about expenses are an important part of the equation. So yes, we've had to cut, but we also recognize that you got to plan for the recovery. So you can't go dark and then reemerge on the other side. So that's really where we are.
How about you, Ron?
Yeah, we've had to make some cuts in that area too, and it's interesting because I think we may actually get better results from having done that. Mm-hmm. Loretta talked a little bit earlier about either postponing or moving away from some of their print. And we feel like it's important to have a good mix of print and digital assets and all those things. But we've moved away almost exclusively from print right now for a variety of reasons. One is simply it's a little bit more difficult to track ROE around those things. But you also can't count on someone being in their office to get, a piece that lands in their mailbox or whatever. I haven't seen mine in 8 weeks. So, and the investment in that is a much more significant one than if you're really working your organic social, and if you're working your different internal platforms to promote and market to your audience from a digital perspective. So our investment in those things is not as significant, but our metrics that we can look at to gauge success around those is so much more effective. So we really look at it like, and I think Loretta made a good point here. For us, if it's not meeting an ROE and an ROI perspective, then we probably look at something else that may check both of those boxes for us in terms of what we do and what we don't.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. We have 3 questions that we haven't answered yet. So Kathy LaRocca earlier asked Loretta how you're tracking the pulse of the industry, surveys, calls.
Both. So instead of telemarketing with an outside firm. We are bringing that in-house customer service to do arrears calls, and it's a check-in. It's truly, it's a check-in. We're checking in, and if, by the way, they remember that they haven't paid their dues, we're happy to help them. We're also doing an industry survey, and with a couple of other, so civil engineering, a couple of other industries, and doing that probably we're going to see, but we've done every 3-4 weeks or so to see how things are changing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Industry insights.
Yeah. And Ron, how about you?
Well, and our call campaigns are been more geared around onboarding new members, because oftentimes you find that they join for one very specific reason. They want to be part of your communities, or they want a discount for your event, or whatever that is. So it's been a really good opportunity to give them to check in, as Loretta said, versus trying to sell them anything, but make sure they also know what's available to them as members. So whether that's engaging in your certification programming, or participating in your events, or knowing that there's a webinar series, or whatever that portfolio of products and services you offer, just making sure that they're aware of what those things are, and also just having a good experience. And there's, we have periodic timing around when we do that, so that they feel like they're actually getting kind of this white glove approach to membership. So by the time they come back for renewal and that's on their plate, it's a no-brainer for them. So we're looking at that less as a sales opportunity and more as a kind of feel good, and just making sure that they are taking advantage of all the assets related to membership for them.
Great. 2 other questions. So let's see, are associations looking at creating content and tools focused on tackling any future pandemic situation? More digital platforms like apps, web forums?
Yeah. What's interesting too is we look at the event landscape right now, and we're still planning an in-person event. We're hoping that's going to happen. We're simultaneously planning a virtual version of that is more robust than what we've done in the past. But I think it's creating an infrastructure for us now that we'll be able to replicate and stand up in a whole variety of ways down the road. So I could see whatever platform we choose for that being something that we're using in our webinar series, something that we're using to deliver a chief security officer summit later on. So it's, the investments we're making in those things now, both in terms of finances and in time, and in terms of, brain power from our team, are things that I think we'll be able to replicate in a whole variety of other ways down the road.
And to Loretta's point earlier, the analytics that you'll get from all of that will be incredible, incredibly rich.
Yep.
Last question, are associations trying to use AI and machine learning for analyzing large data and decision making?
I mean, are they?
Yeah.
I know that there are some who already are. We're making our way there. This digital strategy that we're working on is, first phase is personalization, and then from there we'll be able to ramp up the AI efforts. But we got to do things in phases and try and do it in a manageable way. But certainly that is definitely where it's going.
How about you, Ron?
Yeah, we have a daily brief that's been going out for quite some time. And we are transitioning over to a platform that is AI and machine learning oriented, so that it is more geared to the individual user. The content that we're providing to them is based on how they've engaged with this in the past. So it really starts to build as time goes on and they leverage that product to give them more customized content in real time based on how they've participated in it in weeks and months and years prior to that. So for us, that's a really important part of making sure they're getting what they want when they want it in the format that they want it. But I do think, finding ways and tools to embed that into your website, into your app, into all these other platforms you have too is increasingly critical. And for us, as we make this transition now, it'll be a good test drive for how to do that more effectively down the road.
Great. Well, we are at our time. Our hour passed quickly. Thank you, Loretta and Ron, for joining us and providing these rich insights for our colleagues.